Last night, after more than 24 hours of obfuscation, Keir Starmer finally agreed to support the US and Israel's actions in Iran. Canada and Australia had already backed our allies on Saturday, but until last night, Keir Starmer still couldn't tell the British people where our country stood, or even whether the UK would allow the use of our air bases. It took Iranian missiles hitting allies in the Middle East and threatening tens of thousands of British nationals across the Gulf before the Prime Minister finally climbed off the fence. Iran's regime has funded international terrorism, attacked British nationals, brutally repressed its own citizens, and continues to try to develop a nuclear weapon. And yet, even this morning, the Foreign Secretary still can't say if the Labour government supports action against Iran. People in Britain will be wondering why our country's response has been so weak. The official explanation for the hesitancy is international law, but this is a fig leaf. The real explanation is not legal, it is political. Across the UK, there are groups whose political loyalties when it comes to conflicts in the Middle East do not align with British national interest. These are people who Labour see as their voters because without them, they cannot stay in power. This isn't international law or principle. It's pure partisan political calculation from a Labour Party that has surrendered its right to govern our country, and it is the reality of decades of failed integration policy. Britain's interests, both economically and militarily, are being put under threat by rising separatism in this country. A separatism that we saw on full display in the by-election last week. I want to talk today about the real lesson from Gorton and Denton. Much of the commentary in the days since has fixated on this issue of family voting. Yes, our voting laws must be upheld, but I do not believe that all those women marched into polling booths to stop them from voting for reform, and they were asked to vote Hannah Spencer because that was not what they wanted to do. I'm afraid that they didn't want to vote Conservative either, just as they haven't for 80 years. By fixating on family voting, we risk learning the wrong lesson from this by-election, just as we did in Batley and Spen in 2021. Something else is happening, something much deeper and much more disturbing. What those by-elections had in common was campaigning designed to mobilize voters on ethnicity and religion, not domestic priorities. People were voting not based on who would increase their wages or fix their schools, but on who would protect the interests of their identity groups and punish those who they disagree with. This is not healthy, and it is not British. It is appalling that separatist campaigning was carried out in Urdu by the Green Party. Campaigning with different messages in a foreign language is a deliberate ploy to exclude those who do not speak that language. It is not in the service of integration. It is about cynically driving a wedge between groups to make it easier to harvest ethnic votes. And the rise of separatism in Britain is making it easier for this style of campaigning to work. Some people don't think separatism is a problem. Others are scared to talk about it. They worry about looking divisive. I say to those people, we must tackle this. We need to be bold and we need to be brave. But we also need to do it with the right tone. Anyone can throw a match and walk away. But the point of this is not to divide or even provoke. It's the opposite. It is about bringing people in Britain together around a common culture and a common identity. There is a vacuum of competence on this issue right now, and that is why Conservatives have to lead. No one else can or will do this properly. We have to. My speech today is an answer to a complex question. Why are we seeing more separatism? And why have previous solutions not worked? And how do we fix it? Separatism is on the rise in our country because for too long, Britain has been complacent about our culture and too tolerant of those weaponizing identity politics for their own gain. And I want to be very clear about what I'm talking about here. It is separatism, not sectarianism. Separatism is a way of living that keeps a group apart from the wider society. People who say, we live here, but we don't join in. People who see Britain as a place to use, not a country to belong to. This is what I mean when I say our country is our home. It is not a hotel. Sectarianism is a symptom of separatism. It's the politics that follows when people are taught to think as blocks. Vote for us because you are one of us. Previous governments have failed to deal with sectarianism because they did not address its root cause, separatism. And the consequences of these failures are clear. The rape gang scandal is the ugliest example. Abuse of children on an industrial scale. Criminals left unchallenged for decades because authorities feared being called racist or losing votes more than they feared failing victims. A lot of political attention in recent years has been focused on immigration or Islamist extremism. Both matter. But if you don't deal with the separatism that allows extremism to grow, then you don't address its root cause. Extremists thrive where separatism has already done the groundwork, where dissenters have nowhere outside of their community to turn. And separatism is most visible in some Muslim communities, with Islamist extremism its most violent expression. But we are also seeing a rise of separatism in other communities. Intimidation tactics in our politics, attacks like the one we saw on the Indian High Commission in London in March 2023 by Sikh separatists. A lot of diaspora politics in Britain is just imported conflict, and when overseas grievances are imported, they produce separatist activism here. The reason our frameworks for dealing with extremism and terrorism have often failed is because they are not dealing with separatism or the failure of integration. Not enough work has been done around a positive, constructive alternative for people living in close communities who have little option but to agree with or defend the status quo. That is what I want to fix. I was struck by the results of a focus group of Muslim voters published last week. It showed that many of them don't see a positive case for integration and, in fact, see separatism as normal. One of them described the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, as forgetting where she came from. This shows the scale of opposition that many minorities face when they do the right thing and try to join the mainstream. If a Home Secretary is being spoken of like that, imagine what the kids are having to deal with. We need to provide a framework that protects them and backs them up. And the most important question we must ask is who is really losing from this? The biggest victims are the people who are trapped inside separatism. Children growing up here in England, but fenced off from the full life of this country. Women blocked from work, from independence, from building a life of their own. Girls treated as adults far too young, with rules of modesty imposed on their clothing, even in their school uniforms. Then they're treated like children when they are pressured into marriages they did not choose, sometimes to someone they've never met, sometimes even from another country, because that's the dumb thing. This is the reality that Labour and the Green Party and others who pander to separatism pretend not to see. They call it community, I call it coercion. Then there are the victims who should have been protected, like during the rape gang scandal. Victims like the teacher who was forced to go into hiding after showing a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad in a lesson. Increasingly, the victims are Jews. They are threatened, attacked, their homes and businesses vandalized, their restaurants, even their primary schools needing security guards. 2 Jewish worshippers murdered at Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester during Yom Kippur. Just last month in Brighton and in Sheffield, activists went door to door urging boycotts of Israeli goods. Let's be honest about what that is. A political movement turning up on your doorstep, demanding that you prove that you're on the right side and recording those who do not comply. This is intimidation, pure and simple. And what did the local Green MP have to say about it? She said that the campaigners were well-intentioned. This is normalizing the targeting of Jews. It is normalizing the targeting of Jews in their own neighborhoods just to pick up votes. Shameful. And no other party seems to care about this except Conservatives. We care because we believe in a united country, a Britain that feels recognizable wherever you are, not just a collection of tribes. I have long argued that while Britain is a multiracial country, we must not be a multicultural one. And some people think this is a controversial position because they do not understand what culture is. Culture is not your skin color. It's not just the food you eat or the clothes you wear for a festival. Culture is much deeper than that. It is behaviors, it is norms, it is expectations. Expectations about the role of women, about children and the freedoms they're allowed as they grow. It is attitudes to authority, who gets which jobs and how. It's concepts of fairness, notions of tolerance, free speech, and definitions of what is sacred. That is what culture is. We must tackle this ludicrous idea that culture means something that comes from somewhere else, which leads to children being sent home for wearing Union Jack outfits as their choice on Culture Day, basically telling those children that there is no such thing as English or British culture and the only good things about our country are imported. This is rubbish. I understand. I understand what culture is because I grew up in a genuinely multicultural society where everyone looked the same, yet norms, behaviors, languages, even ways of practicing the same religion were quite different. British culture exists. We live in it, we benefit from it, and we have a duty to defend it and pass it on. The answer to this is integration. But for integration to work, people have to know what they're integrating into. A culture which is strong and self-confident. It does not work if Britain is a mess of competing cultures, and it cannot work if we are not brave enough to say who we are and what we expect. Integration can only work when people come in at a pace and in numbers that can be easily absorbed. That is why last year we toughened up our immigration policy. And let me be honest, I don't even think integration is the real objective. Assimilation is. This should be common sense. If you join a country, you join the country. You don't create your own separate thing. Tolerance is an important part of any decent society. But tolerating minority communities doesn't mean that we want people living in tribes. What we want is assimilation. One society with shared norms under the same laws. Instead of asking newcomers to join our way of life, too many people in authority decided integration was a two-way street. This is what creates the space for separatism, with endless arguments about halal meat and whether or not we should ban burqas. The fact is, if authorities cannot enforce the law on family voting in Gorton, I can assure you they're not going to be ripping burqas off women's faces or putting them in prison. Banning burqas in France has not improved integration. I want to see the end of women covering their faces in this country. And what I'm talking about today will show us how we do it. Once upon a time, we talked about British values of tolerance and live and let live, muscular liberalism. Over the years, this has drifted into something weaker, tolerance without confidence and principles without enforcement. I'm afraid that muscular liberalism is no longer enough. We must never undersell the value of liberty and freedom. They are necessary for our society to flourish. However, freedom without clarity on boundaries or clarity on what needed protecting bred a slow normalization of separatism. It resulted in double standards and parallel norms until the country started to feel like it was running a two-tier system with different rules for different people. What we need is muscular conservatism. Muscular conservatism starts from a simple truth. We don't want to throw away any of the things that are good about our society. We want to keep them, defend them, and pass them on. That means having the courage to set boundaries. It means being willing to enforce standards and not be embarrassed by doing so. That is what muscular conservatism looks like in practice. we conserve. We keep the things that make this country work: the rule of law, equal citizenship, free speech, personal responsibility. We draw limits to protect what we cherish. For many years, I cherished the fact that this was a country where anti-Semitism was rare. But because of our tolerance of attitudes that don't align with British values, we have lost this. In theory, this country still believes in free speech. But without enforcing limits and equal standards, equal rights, we ended up tolerating marches that were intimidating Jews across our cities. And for too long, integration has been managerial more than moral. And let me tell you what I mean by that. It's when governments announce strategies, a new strategy, a new consultation, more grants for community projects, but there's no real willingness to say what the newcomers are joining or what the civic norms actually are. Muscular conservatism is the end of that drift. We are not just a collection of individuals doing whatever we like until someone complains. We are more than that. A society is a set of shared norms enforced fairly, passed on deliberately. And this requires clear principles, a clear diagnosis, and the nerve to act. It means refusing to be cowed into silence. And it means delivery, relentless, practical delivery of a plan. So today, I'm announcing our plans to deal with separatism, culture, and integration. It starts with a new Cultural and Integration Commission, who I am tasking with preparing an interim report by the time of our party conference in October. From that, we will create an integration and cohesion plan that sets out the culture that we want people to assimilate into, what we expect and what we will enforce. But first, we must do away with what has failed. Integration being treated as an administrative process has not worked. That era is over. We will act on a simple doctrine. 1, we will end identity politics in the state, full stop. No racial preferences. Protected characteristics will not be used as criteria for hiring, promotion, admissions, or procurement. There will be no more. There will be no more state-sponsored division. From now on, every public body will act based on merit and competence, not grievance and quotas. I will ask the Commission to investigate how we ensure that integration is a duty where Britain sets the terms. Newcomers should join our country, not try to change it. And we will back the people who enforce those standards. School leaders, police officers, NHS staff, employers, the people who are currently left to take the risk on their own. That is not fair. They need us, and we are going to show up for them. That was the first thing.